Three American V8s. Same era, same size, same legendary badges. One so highly strung, it can tear itself apart. One survives the strip and the commute without a single complaint. One got rushed in to save a dying legend. But here's the twist. The toughest one on paper is actually the most fragile. Chevy 302, Ford 289, Pontiac 301. Only one of them actually lasts. Let's find out which. The Chevy 302, the race engine that never wanted to be a street engine. Let's start with the Chevy, because the story of the 302 is not really the story of an engine. It's the story of a rule book. In 1967, Chevrolet wanted into the SCCA Trans Am series. Big-time factory road racing, Mustangs and Cougars against Camaros, wheel-to-wheel, corner after corner. But Trans Am had a hard limit, 5 liters, 305 cubic inches. No exceptions, and Chevrolet didn't have anything that fit, so their engineers did something almost surgical. They took the block from the 327, kept its 4-inch bore, and dropped in the crankshaft from the smaller 283, which gave it a shorter 3-inch stroke. Mix those two together and you get 302.4 cubic inches, just barely under the limit. On paper, it looks like a mutt. In practice, it's one of the smartest pieces of engineering GM ever signed off on. Here's why that combination matters. A shorter stroke means the pistons don't have as far to travel in the cylinder. Less distance, less time, which means the engine can spin to much higher RPM before things start flying apart. Chevrolet paired that short stroke bottom end with forged pistons, forged connecting rods, a tough crankshaft, and a solid lifter camshaft nicknamed the 3030. Add high-flow double-hump cylinder heads and a high-rise aluminum intake, and what you get is an engine that doesn't just tolerate high RPM. It wants it. It comes alive north of $5,000 and doesn't sign off until close to $7,000. Chevrolet officially rated the 302 at 290 horsepower. Nobody who's ever put one on a dyno believes that number. The real figure is closer to 350, maybe even 400 horsepower, wrapped in a wrapper Chevrolet deliberately undersold so it wouldn't attract too much attention from insurance companies and corporate bean counters. And it worked exactly like it was supposed to. The Camaro Z28 took the Trans Am Manufacturers' Championship in both 1968 and 1969, back-to-back, beating Ford at their own game. So that's the legend. Now here's the catch, and this is the part a lot of Chevy fans don't want to hear. The 302 was never built to be a comfortable street engine. It was built to win a road race. And those two goals pull in opposite directions. A short stroke, high-revving engine like this makes almost nothing down low. Idle around town, short shift at 3,000 RPM, the way most drivers naturally do, and the 302 feels flat, unimpressive, even a little disappointing. You have to wring its neck to get anything out of it. Solid lifters mean it also needs regular valve adjustments, something a hydraulic lifter engine never asks for. Or you start hearing that telltale tick that tells you it's time to get under the hood again. And because Chevrolet only built this thing for 3 model years, 1967 through 1969, exclusively for the first generation Z28, parts sourcing gets trickier every year that passes. Original blocks are getting scarce. Original cranks are getting scarcer. A lot of what's out there driving around today isn't a numbers-matching factory 302 anymore. It's a modern stroker build wearing the name, because building a real one from scratch has become its own expensive hobby. So here's the honest verdict on the Chevy 302. If you want the most explosive, most race-bred engine of this trio, an engine that will flat-out reward you if you're willing to drive it the way it wants to be driven. Nothing here touches it. But if you're the kind of owner who wants to putter to the grocery store on a Sunday and expects an easy, forgiving daily companion, this is the wrong engine for that job. The 302 doesn't age like fine wine sitting in a garage. It ages like an athlete. Use it or lose it. The Ford 289, the engine that was built to do both. Now let's cross over to Dearborn, because Ford took a completely different approach to the same problem, and honestly, it might be the smarter one. The 289 showed up in 1963 as part of Ford's Windsor small block family, essentially a bored-out version of the earlier 260. Ford needed something that could power everything from a full-size family sedan to a brand-new little car that hadn't even launched yet, a car called the Mustang. That's a wide net to cast with one engine, and that's exactly what makes the 289's story different from the Chevys. Ford wasn't building a one-purpose weapon for a racetrack. They were building an engine that had to be good at everything, because it was about to end up under a huge range of hoods. In its mildest form, the 289 with a two-barrel carburetor made a modest 195 horsepower. Nothing to write home about. But Ford also built a genuinely special version of this engine, and this is the one people actually talk about. The K-Code, better known as the Hi-Po. Hi-Po for high performance, and it earned the name. The K-Code got its own solid lifter camshaft, a compression ratio pushed up to 10.5 to 1, screw-in rocker studs so the valve train could handle high RPM without the rocker arms working loose, a dual-point distributor for a hotter, more precise spark, and a bigger 4-barrel carburetor. Officially, it made 271 horsepower. That doesn't sound like a monster number today, but remember the weight of the car it was bolted into. In a lightweight Mustang or Fairlane, that horsepower-to-weight ratio was genuinely serious for 1963. This is the same engine, in a further tuned form, that Carroll Shelby stuffed into the original Shelby GT 350. Shelby's team pushed compression even higher and swapped in a bigger Holley carburetor, and the result was an engine that could legitimately embarrass cars with a lot more displacement under the hood. But here's the part that separates the 289 from the Chevy 302, and it's the whole reason we're talking about it in a video about which engine actually lasts. Ford's engineers designed the Hi-Po specifically so that its extra performance didn't come at the cost of everyday reliability. Read the old factory literature on this engine, and one phrase keeps showing up. It was conceived to have reliability and durability built in to match its performance, not instead of its performance, alongside it. What that meant in practice was a 5-main bearing bottom end that was fundamentally overbuilt for the power it made. A valve train that, while it does use solid lifters and does need periodic adjustment just like the Chevy, was engineered with enough margin that it didn't live on a knife's edge the way the 302 does. The 289 makes real usable torque low in the RPM range, not just up near redline. That means you don't have to abuse it to enjoy it. It pulls happily from a stoplight, it cruises comfortably on the highway, and it still has a genuine top end for when you want to use it. And there's a practical bonus here that muscle car people love, and casual buyers never think about until they need it. The 289 is part of Ford's Windsor small block family, the same architecture that grew into the 302 and eventually the 351 Windsor. That means decades of shared engineering, shared machine work, and a massive aftermarket of parts that were never exclusive to some tiny 3-year production window. If you need a part for a 289, you're not hunting down a unicorn. You are shopping from one of the largest parts ecosystems in American car history. So here's the honest verdict on the Ford 289. It doesn't have the outright screaming top-end drama of the Chevy 302, but it doesn't need to be flogged just to feel alive either. It's the engine that's genuinely happy doing both jobs, Sunday cruiser and Saturday track day, without punishing you for picking the wrong one. Of the 3 engines in this video, this is the one that was built, on purpose, from day one to actually last. Now, before we get into the third engine, and trust me, this is the one with the wildest story of the three. If you're finding this kind of deep dive into American muscle useful, do us a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling us which of these three you'd actually want parked in your garage, and if you haven't already, subscribe and tap that notification bell. We're breaking down engines like this every single week, and you don't want to miss the next one. All right, let's talk about Pontiac, and let's talk about what happens when a great engine name runs headfirst into a terrible decade. The Pontiac 301, the engine that showed up to a gunfight with a butter knife. Here's the thing you need to understand about the Pontiac 301 before we even get to the specs. It wasn't born as a performance engine, it was born as a survivor. By the mid to late 1970s, the American muscle car was dying, and it wasn't dying from lack of interest. It was dying from insurance premiums, tightening emissions rules, and gas prices that made big block V8s a genuinely painful thing to own. Pontiac's beloved 400 and 455 cubic inch big blocks, the engines that had powered the GTO and the Trans Am through the glory years, were being phased out one at a time, and Pontiac needed something smaller, lighter, and more efficient to keep the Firebird alive at all. That something was the 301, a genuinely economy-minded small block, sized down specifically to meet the moment. In its standard form, it was never meant to set anyone's hair on fire. It was meant to sip fuel and keep a Firebird technically on the road while the rest of the industry figured out what came next. And then Pontiac tried something bold with it. In 1980, facing the total collapse of their big block lineup, Pontiac engineers looked at what Buick had just done with a turbocharged V6 and thought, why not try that here? Take the humble 301, thicken up the block, strengthen the internal parts, drop the compression down to handle boost, and bolt on a Garrett turbocharger. The result was the Pontiac 301 Turbo, the first turbocharged production V8 Pontiac ever built, and the last engine to ever wear a Trans Am hood before GM handed the keys over to Chevy small blocks for good. On paper, it sounds like a great comeback story. 210 horsepower, 345 pound-feet of torque, turbocharged muscle for a new decade. In reality, it fell apart almost immediately, and here's exactly why. Turbocharging in 1980 was still a young, unrefined technology, especially without an intercooler. That meant the compressed air coming off the turbo went straight into the engine hot, which is exactly the condition that causes an engine to detonate. Essentially, the fuel-air mixture igniting at the wrong moment, hammering the pistons and rings instead of pushing them smoothly. The 301 Turbo's bottom end, remember, started life as an economy engine. It simply wasn't built with the same margin for abuse that a purpose-built performance block would have had. Then there was the turbo itself. It was oil-cooled, which meant it depended entirely on a steady, clean supply of oil to keep its bearings alive. Owners who weren't religious about frequent oil changes with quality oil found out the hard way what happens when that supply gets neglected. The oil would cook and coke up inside the turbo. The bearings would seize, and that was the end of that turbocharger. And here's the number that really tells the story. Pontiac's outgoing 400 cubic inch big block, the one the Turbo 301 was supposed to replace, was conservatively rated at 220 horsepower on paper, but was actually making well over 260 in the real world. The new 301 Turbo, meant to be its modern replacement, ran a quarter mile roughly a full second and a half slower. Owners who'd been driving Trans Ams for years could feel it immediately. This wasn't progress. It was a step backward wearing a turbocharger badge to disguise it. Talk to people who actually owned and wrenched on these cars, and the story repeats itself almost word for word. The originals often blow up when they're driven hard, and a huge number of surviving turbo Trans Ams on the road today aren't running their factory engine at all. Owners pulled the fragile original and dropped in a traditional, naturally aspirated Pontiac V8 instead. A 350, a 400, sometimes even a Chevy small block, just to have something that would actually survive being driven like a muscle car. Now, to be fair to Pontiac here, because we want to be straight with you, not every 301 was a disaster. The standard, naturally aspirated version, the one just doing economy car duty under a Firebird hood, was reasonably dependable as long as you understood it was never a performance engine and never treated it like one. The problem was almost entirely with the turbocharged version, the one Pontiac specifically built and marketed to save its performance reputation, and the one that ended up doing exactly the opposite. By 1981, GM had seen enough. The Turbo Trans Am was quietly discontinued. The 301 as a whole disappeared right along with it. And starting in 1982, when the all-new third-generation Firebird launched, there wasn't a Pontiac-built V8 available at all. Every performance Firebird from that point forward ran a Chevrolet small block instead. That's not a small detail. That's Pontiac's own engineering division essentially conceding they couldn't build the V8 anymore and letting a sister division do it for them. So here's the honest verdict on the Pontiac 301. As a mild, economy-focused small block, it did the unglamorous job it was actually designed for. But as the engine that was supposed to carry the Trans Am's performance legacy into a new decade, it failed in almost every way that mattered. Reliability, durability, and the raw performance the badge on the hood was promising. Of these three engines, it's the only one that wasn't just retired. It was replaced by another company's engine in Pontiac's own flagship car because Pontiac's own version couldn't be trusted to do the job. So let's go back to those three men we opened this video with. Three engines, same rough size, same era, wildly different fates. The Chevy 302 is the genius that never learned how to relax. Give it revs, give it attention, give it the driving style it was actually engineered for, and it will reward you with some of the most explosive small block performance American engineering ever produced. Treat it like a lazy Sunday cruiser, and it will punish you for wasting its potential. The Ford 289 is the engine that never had to choose. Ford's engineers built performance and durability into the same block at the same time, on purpose, and it shows every single day that engine turns over. It's not the loudest story of the three, it's just the one that quietly kept working long after the drama had faded. And the Pontiac 301, especially in its turbocharged form, is the cautionary tale. Proof that a legendary badge and a desperate deadline can produce an engine that looks like a comeback on paper and plays out like a retreat in real life. If you're standing in front of a car with one of these three engines under the hood today, here's the test that actually matters. Don't ask what the badge says. Ask how the engine was actually built to be driven. Was it built for the red line or for the daily grind? Was performance and durability designed in together, or was one of them bolted on as an afterthought under pressure? Those questions will tell you more about how that engine holds up in year 40 than any nameplate ever will. And that's the real story behind the Chevy 302, the Ford 289, and the Pontiac 301. Three small blocks, three completely different philosophies, and honestly, three lessons in what it actually takes to build an engine that lasts. If you learned something today, that's exactly why we make these videos. This channel exists because we love this stuff just as much as you do. The history, the engineering, the arguments in the comments about which brand actually did it better. So if you're new here, welcome. You're in the right place. Do us a favor before you go. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this breakdown. Drop a comment and tell us which of these three engines you'd actually trust to sit in your driveway for the next 20 years. And don't hold back if you've got a story about one of them. We read every single comment. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Tap that bell too so you never miss the next deep dive. We've got another video queued up right on your screen that we think you're going to love just as much as this one. Go check it out, and we'll see you in the next one.